BHIE 142. It is our first class of BHIE 142. And this is the time period of 1868 to 1945. History of modern East Asia and related to Japan. History of modern East Asia. And we are going to study about Japan and the connection of Japan with other countries, export, import, and what was the condition of Japan, and what about the emperorship and the empires uh, run by Japan at that time in 1868 to 1945. This is a time period which we are going to study in this class. And this is the unit 1, the roots of modern Japan. In this class, we will cover only unit 1 because if we will study about the basics of Japan, history of Japan, and the roots of modern Japan, which we are looking at Japan nowadays, then the basics will be very clear to all of us. And from next class, we will cover 2 units in one class. Okay, that is very important to all of you. That is unit 1, the roots of modern Japan. Means we are going to study about the roots, and this unit will locate Japan within the East Asian region. East Asian region introduce you to some characteristics of geographical environment, give a broad outline of historical developments till 18th century. And we are going to study about Japan and its geographical environment and so many characteristics which we will cover in this class. Now on screen you can see the map of Japan. You can see a very small country, Japan. It is, if you will see on world map. Yes, you can see the connection of Japan in this, in other areas, with other areas, and how far it from India, and how far it from China, and how far it for Korea, Taiwan, and so on. And the connection of Japan with other countries, especially China, Korea, Taiwan, that we will be going to start in this class. You can see, because from starting, if we are going to start about a study of Japan, then you should know where it is nowadays. And when it is located on political world map. Okay, this red portion you are looking on your screen, that is Japan. Next, East Asia and its neighborhood. East Asia and its neighborhood. Neighborhood means the neighbor countries of Japan. The key features important to keep in mind are that Japan composed of 4 main islands. You know, Japan composed of 4 main islands, and other smaller ones was physically separated from continental mainland but not isolated from its influences. The Japanese were bound to the mainland through maritime connections. Yes, they connected with other countries, with other continents, with maritime connections. The states of Tsushima and Lai, that lie between Japan and Korea Peninsula, are only 120 miles wide. So Korean connections were an important route for the entry of people, ideas, and trade to the Japanese islands. The connection of Japan with Korea, the connection of Japan with other islands, the connection of Japan with the China. In this period, crossing the East China, crossing the East China. Yes, I'm going to repeat this because China, you can see that is the India. India you can locate on world map very easily. That is very friendly to all of you. And you can see on screen the right side, the China is located on the right side. If we are going to study like this, okay, in front of map, we can see the the place of China on the right side of India, and on the left side of Japan. You can see on the map, and China is the middle of Japan and India, on middle place. Yes, they are connected with each other, and with the help of export, import, and so on. Sea route is also connected with that. In this period, crossing the East China Sea was dangerous. So Japan was insulated from direct contact and the possibilities of invasion by China, because China can invade Japan very easily because they are connected with each other and they are neighboring countries. And with from neighboring countries, we have a horror and we have a fear that the neighboring country will attack on us. That is the very possibility of that particular time, which was the dominant political and cultural power in the region. Japan was connected to the continent but protected from political interference. Okay, next one is Japan. And what was the geographical environment? Was the geographical condition of that particular area? That is, we are talking about Japan. Geographical condition. It is important to understand the geography when studying history, as it defines what is possible for the inhabitants. And the Japanese archipelago is a relatively recent creation. The process started only some 15 million years ago. 15 million years ago, the process started. But it has mostly been during 2.5 million, 2 to 5 million years that the islands as we know them have been created. That is very difference between these two lines, because the process started only some 15 million years ago, and we came to know about that island near about 2 to 5 million years ago. Maya, you can understand, Maya, million years ago. And these islands were brought about by the collision of four tectonic plates. Do you know about the tectonic plates? You have studied in class 8th, class 7th about tectonic plates. That is very friendly to all of you. You have studied in your geography book, in NCRT book. That is very, very much friendly, and you all have read about it. The collision means they both collide with each other, tectonic plates. Okay, these collisions continue to produce earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Collision means the movement of the tectonic plates that produce earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. That is a true. This unstable condition has resulted in periodic disasters, forcing the inhabitants to learn to anticipate and cope with these recurring disasters. The disasters which we are talking about, that is earthquake and volcanic eruptions. And volcanic eruptions and earthquakes produced due to the collision of tectonic plates. And tectonic plates, they produce earthquake. That is known as disasters. And Japan's terrain is 80% mountainous and 20% agricultural land in Japan. And these mountains are on an average 2 to 3,000 meters in height and very steep. Very steep means the standing steep at that time. The mountainous terrain of narrow valleys. Narrow valleys has streams that can turn into raging torrents. Standing means standing mountains, and we are talking about the streams that can turn into raging torrents. This has made water management very important, because if water will slide very fastly to the towards the earth, then that will be very disastrous for the people who they are living about near about the area. This has made water management very important and led to the development of sophisticated water management techniques. Agricultural development was largely confined to the plains, but Sweden or slash and burn agriculture was practiced there in Japan. You need to study about the water management that developed in Japan, and the very less agricultural land, near about 20% of that particular area. That is very important for all of you to study about. The cultivation of the steep hillsides for fuel, fodder, and mulch lead to erosion and flooding as hillsides were denuded of their forest cover. It also led to efforts to maintain forested areas. Today, 70% of Japan still remains wooded. 70%. Yes, that was the geographical environment, that was the agriculture and water management, and the hill area, mountainous area we have studied about, and the disasters, earthquakes. Japan stand on the volcanic, the plates of that particular, how what we can say, the lava of that volcanic eruptions. Japan stand on that area. Next is approaches for study Japanese history. How we are going to start to study about the history of the Japan. That is very important to all of you. Just like if we are going to start any chapter, if we are going to start any topic, then we need to learn about the sources, to know about the study, to know about the history of that particular country, of that particular area. That is also very important. That's why in starting we are going to study about these sources. In Japan, conservative thinkers have based their ideas on the mythic tales of Chronicles of Japan, or Nihon Shoki, and record of ancient matters of Koziki. They are the myths of the stories of Nihon Shoki and the Koziki myths, because the people of Japan used to read about, just like in India, we study about the story of imagination characters. The story of imagination characters we are studying, and our children are also studying about the story of imaginated characters. Just like those type of imaginated characters were Nihon Shoki and the Koziki. The people of Japan used to study about those myths. In these texts, it is written that the islands were created by the gods and sun goddess. Sun goddess sent her grandson to rule the country. Sun goddess sent her grandson to rule the country. Which country? The Japan and so on islands. To this was added the myth that there has been a direct and unbroken line of emperors down to the present emperor. So the emperor was considered a living god. This myth was used in the modern period to mark Japan as different and superior to China and other countries. This is a myth. The sun goddess has sent her grandson to rule the country. This is a myth. But so many emperors had ruled in Japan, so many emperor after emperor after emperor. They considered a living god at that time. And this myth was used in the modern period to mark Japan as different and superior to China and other countries. Yes, nowadays we can say that Japan is a different country, as if we can compare to other countries. Japan is a very different country, and you can say the superior from so many other countries also, technology wise, technique wise, Japan is very different. It was a powerful idea that underpinned political institutions and shaped common understanding. Next one is about the academic writing. How we came to know about the history of Japan. Academic writing in the post-war second means after World War II period has largely represented Japan as the only Asian country to modernize after World War II. The World War II, you have heard about how the World War II had finished with bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The modernization approach glossed over conflicts, peasant rebellions, experience of Japan as a colonizer to underline its difference from China and other Asian countries. They are talking about in Japan, just like other countries, so many depressions were going on at that time, just like peasant rebellions, just like conflicts, just like the war between two emperors, neighboring countries, just like those type of things that were happen in Japan also. These arguments were questioned, particularly after the Vietnam War in 1960s and 1970s. Vietnam War, 1960s and 1970s, and Japanese developments were located within a regional context to show similarities. Japan's colonization of Korea, Japan colonization of Taiwan and parts of China was shown to have shaped Japanese history in decisive ways. How many decisive ways we are talking about? Just like Japan adopted Chinese by the 8th century as the language of administration and culture. In 8th century, by 8th century, Japan adopted Chinese language of administration and culture. The Japanese language is a polysyllabic and conjugated language and very different from Chinese. If we are talking about Chinese language and we are talking about Japanese language, both are different. Okay, in Japanese language you can see if you are going to Google that what was a Chinese language near about, and you will see definitely that was a polysyllabic, means the picture view also present over there, and the alphabetically also that is written, and some conjugated language and very different from Chinese. Japanese used Chinese ideograph. Chinese ideographs means kanji, but also created two alphabets which they used along with the Chinese ideographs to write Japanese as it was spoken. Next, that was related to administration, related to language, and we are going to how the World War was stopped at that time. And after stopping World War II, what was the condition of Japan, and what were they were doing at that time, and what type of just like Vietnam Wars we have discussed about. Vietnam Wars was in 1960s and 1970s, and how the experience of Japanese with other wars and with other countries. Next is the periodization in Japanese history. How, just like if we are going to study about Indian history, then we study about three time periods: ancient, medieval, and modern. And just like this type of history, we are going to study in Japan's history also. Just how the dominant political categorization of Japanese history by ruling dynasties has been questioned in many ways. The standard political divisions are classical period with the Heian 794 to 1180. Heian period, marking the peak of Japanese civilization. Just like if we are going to discuss about Indian history, then the most ancient history, most ancient civilization we are talking about Indus Valley civilization. That's like Heian civilization, Heian time period, Heian time period we can say, Heian 794 to 1180. That marking the peak of Japanese civilization with its distinctive characteristics. In the Heian period, the imperial government was the dominant power. Same, imperial government. This was followed by warrior governments or bakufu. Bakufu means warrior governments of the Kamakura. Kamakura time period is 1185 to 1333. Then the short Kimu restoration when imperial power was restored. Kimu restoration. Imperial power was restored from 1333 to 1336. And then again power passed to a warrior house, Ashikaga or Muromachi Bokufu. Muromachi Bakufu. You will see and you will listen about these type of names because we are studying Japanese history, not the Indian history. There is no Gaurav Saurav, there is no Ram and Sham, and there is no names just like this. If we are studying about Japanese history, then these type of names we will take again and again. Warrior House, Ashikaga, Muromachi Bakufu. Yes, the period from 1573 to 16. Yes, we have studied about those time period, ancient time periods. Ancient time periods means Heian time period, 794 to 1180. Next, the period from 1573 to 1603 saw the emergence of daimyo houses. Daimyo houses that began to control large parts of Japan. Daimyos. The first to emerge from among the daimyos means military, of the military conflicts of time was Oda Nobunaga. He was followed by Toyotomi Hideyoshi and then Tokugawa Ieyasu, who established Tokugawa rule, which lasted from 1603 to 1868. Tokugawa rule. Tokugawa rule. The modern period dates from 1868 when a revolution made Japan into a modern nation state. Ancient, medieval, modern. Ancient Heian period, medieval Tokugawa family, which was running the rule at that time, in modern 1868, and so on. This broad classification has been refined in many ways, but is still the prevailing periodization. Next is the historian Konrad Totman divides Japan's history into three stages. That is very important for all of you. Listen carefully. That is the three stages of Japan's history. Number one, foreigner. Next is agricultural. And next is industrial. Konrad Totman has described the history of Japan into three stages. Stages: forager, agricultural, and industrial. Forager means foraging, means hunting and gathering. People were used those type of things in hunting and involved in those type of things, just like hunting, gathering, and so on. And after that, agriculture started. They came to know about agriculture. They came to know about land and on so on. And after agriculture, they started industrial things. They started to begin with industries. The forager period was when people lived off what the land produced naturally. And this would be roughly up to 400 BCE and encompass the early Jomon and Yavoi cultures. Just like we are talking about the Paleolithic period, Mesolithic period, and the Neolithic period in our Indian history, Same in Japanese history, we are talking about Jomon and Yahoi cultures. Just like hunter gatherers, just like barbarians, we have studied in Indian history. Same things we are going to study about the foraging things. The second period, marked by the use of agriculture, goes through many subphases, just like agriculture begins to develop from the tomb culture period to the classical period of Heian dynasty, but it becomes more intensive by 12th century when power shifted to warrior class during the Kamakura and Tokugawa periods. And the third stage is from around 1890 as industrial society develops on what Totman calls the exploiters of the dead. In other words, society is now living off not just what nature produced, but is using what was produced in the earlier periods. In other words, Totman argues what it argues, he argues it is depleting the natural resources, depleting the natural resources that have been stored, such as fossil fuels, using up stored resources. Next is the making of classical Japan, how Japan considered its culture and so on. In 794, we were talking about the Yamato state built its capital at Heian because the dynasty and the emperorship was running was Heian time period. This marks the beginning of the what has come to be seen as the classical age of Japan, when the main characteristics that are at the core of Japanese civilizations were found. The Heian period spans the years from 794, when the capital was built at Heian, Kyo, to 1185, when power shifted to warrior governments. 794 to 1185, and in 1185 the power was shifted to warrior governments, because in 794, if we are talking about Heian period, then there was no that much enthusiastically, they were not a warrior class at that time, just like hunter gatherers and the barbarians, just like Mongol Empire, we they have studied about. This long period of 400 years is the longest of the standard divisions of Japanese history. Long period, 400 time period, the years is the longest of standard division of Japanese histories. It was a period when Chinese influence through Buddhism was absorbed, adapted, and used to create an imperial state where the emperor exercised direct political control, political power. Buddhism became the state religion. The Chinese language was adopted by elites, and through it, Chinese philosophies and literature were introduced and came to play an important part in intellectual life. That's why was also the period when women writers produced literature written in Japanese language, not in Chinese. The Tale of Genji, a novel of Murakami Shikibu, Tale of Genji. As we are studying in India, the Jataka stories. Same thing, the Tale of Genji, a novel, that is the name of a novel, written by Murakami Shikibu, written in Japanese kana and not Chinese characters. Okay, Japanese characters, not Chinese characters. Paints a picture of Heian aristocratic life, and she has come to be seen as the greatest Japanese writer. Greatest Japanese writer. If you study 11th class history, then in 11th class history book, in NCRT book, the Tale of Genji, a box has given in the which chapter, just like Mongol Empire and so on. If you will read about that Japanese history, then you will see the tale of Genji, and that is given in that particular box also. Because very important thing you are studying nowadays, if you are going to study about the civil services and so on, then this will be very important part you will study in this. Just like Genji, Tale of Genji, a novel by Murakami Shikibu, written in Japanese language, about Japanese characters, not Chinese characters, paint a picture of Han aristocratic life, and she has come to be seen as the greatest Japanese writer, somewhat like Kalidas in Sanskrit and Shakespeare in English. Yes, if we compare with this. The Heian period named after the capital, which in turn was modeled on the Chinese capital of Chang'an, brought together earlier clan. Clan means the one, means Uzi in Japanese, if we are talking about, based groups into an imperial state modeled on the Tang dynasty. Tang dynasty state, a time period of Tang dynasty 618 to 907, that was run in China but adapted to Japanese ideas. The emperor was the sole rule, but unlike in China, was considered divine. In China, the bureaucracy was well developed and strong, but while the Japanese had bureaucratic organizations, posts were meant by hereditary nobles. Rules, regulations were developed to create a military organization and a system of tax collection collectively known as Ritsuryo. Penal codes and civil codes, Ritsuryo system, tax collection. The country was divided into provinces, each to be ruled by a governor. However, unlike China, a council of religious practices was placed above all offices. Emperor and nobility did not simply surrender their power to outside interest, but rather the nobility created a royal court state, Ochakoka, whereby they contracted certain political duties to concentrate on rituals, which were in those times an equally important part of politics. They did not surrender or lose sight of how this power was exercised, but were involved in different ways. What was the culture of the Heian period? Because we are talking about Heian period, then we should know about the culture of Heian period of Japan. Heian civilization was an aristocratic culture which was created and carried on by a few thousand countries. During the 10th and 11th centuries, this culture produced a highly sophisticated and refined aesthetic philosophy. Material life was, however, extremely simple and austere. The diet was rice, vegetables, and very little meat or fish was eaten. Vegetarians people were more at that time in Japan, and in vegetables, and just like if we are talking about veg people, the diet of the people was mainly rice eating people were there. A few people were non-vegetarian, and in the meat, if we talk about were using eating they were using eat fish. Tea was introduced from China only in 19th century, but was used only as a medicine. The ox cart was the major form of transport. Ships were simple and could not safely make voyages across the seas but had to hug the cost. Buddhism came to be Japan. Buddhism came to Japan from China through Korea, and Buddhism provided the religious foundations for the new imperial state. In 740s, Emperor Shomu built the Todaiji. Todaiji was a Buddhist temple reputed to be the largest wooden structure of its time. That is very important to all of you, for all of you. The Emperor Shomu in 740s, 724 to 749, Shomu built the Todaiji. Todaiji was a Buddhist temple that was made from the largest wooden structure of its time. Initially supported by the state Buddhist sect such as Tendai, founded by Kukai, and Shingon by the monk Saicho, developed first Mongol invasion was to test the ground, and second said to be the largest sea expedition. Ignore this. First, the Buddhist temple we were talking about, for the Buddhist temple made by wood. That was the name of that particular temple was Todaiji. And who made that? Shomu. Shomu was the emperor. Okay, structure at that time very different structure of its time, and it was supported by the state Buddhist sect such as Tendai, that was founded by Kukai and Shingon. Time period you have seen on screen. Okay, the first, now next is the first Mongol invasion. Mongols you have studied about the Genghis Khan and so on, and the first Mongol invasion was to test the ground, and the second said to be the largest sea expedition till 20th century, was defeated partly because of Japanese preparations, but also because a typhoon caused extensive damage to the ships. It seems that the Japanese would have won in any case, but the divine wind kamikaze that destroyed the Mongol ships became a major mythic event that was used by some to underline how Japan has been protected by the gods. The people of Japan thought like this: the Japan has been protected by the gods, and God blessed us with this winning from Mongols. Okay, next one is competing powers: emperor, religious groups, and warriors. How they compete with other countries, Japan, with China, with India, and how they compete with other countries. The imperial state's power did not last long, as it gradually conceded land and the right to collect revenue to noble families and Buddhist monasteries. The nobility and the Buddhist monasteries acquired control over land estates or shoin and collected the taxes and raised their own armies. They became politically powerful. By 1200, over half of all imperial tax lands had become shoin, that is, privately held land outside the state's control. The imperial state also lost control over its armed retainers, and by 1150, samurai or warrior bands, samurai warrior bands, they both are same, samurai class or warrior class. The owing loyalty to their leaders had emerged in that, in imperial states. These groups were hierarchically organized and bound by kinship and loyalty to their leaders. Minamoto Yoritomo. Minamoto Yoritomo, the leader of Taira. Taira, one of the major families that was contending for power, emerged as the most powerful leader. Who was the leader? Minatomo Yoritomo. The revenues extracted from Osaka, Kyoto were restricted and supported a very small elite. By the 11th century, the Kenai region had been stripped of extractable resources. It was against this background that by 1190, real power had shifted from imperial capital Kyoto to Kamakura. Imperial power had shifted from Kyoto to Kamakura. That is also the name of the region in Japan. Next is the Japanese scholar Kuroda Toshio. Japanese scholar Kuroda Toshio argues that between the 11th and 15th century, 11th century and the 15th century, between these time periods, the state authority was divided between three powers working together. State authority was divided between three powers working together. He uses a word used for family in this period. A word used for family in this period. What was that? Kinemon, or powerful families. Kinemon. Kuroda identifies three groups of families. Kuroda identifies three groups of families, just like the courtiers, the warriors, the religious institutions. Courtiers, warriors, religious institutions, those three groups of families were very important for the administration. Courtiers, warriors, religious institutions. Warriors means samurai, as I told you earlier, and religious institution, jisha, and the courtiers, kuge. Kuroda looked at these three groups, the courtiers, the warriors, the religious institutions, as a part of one political system organized similarly and interdependent. Yoritomo established his warrior government or bakufu, warrior government or bakufu at Kamakura in the Kanto region, working out a power sharing arrangement with the emperor. Yoritomo received many titles from emperor as a mark of his power and authority. They used to give the titles to the emperors, just mark of his power and the authority. One of these titles, what was that? Barbarian subduing generalissimo. Sei Tai Shogun. Sei Tai Shogun means barbarian subduing generalissimo. Has become the best known in English. Sei Tai Shogun. Next, the political power was based on the daimyo. Political power was based on daimyo or regional lords. Daimyo means the landlords who were having the land related to that particular region, who exercised a high degree of autonomy in their domains. If we are talking about the domains, we are talking about the regions where they had their autonomy in that particular regions, and the regional lords were known as daimyo, and each daimyo attempted to increase his power by encroaching on imperial lands or that of other lords, leading to a period of instability termed gekokujo, gekokujo, or those below toppling those above. Religious institutions were an integral part of the political system. Just like nowadays in India, we are talking about Ram Mandir, just like that. In Japan also, the religious institutions were an integral part of political system, and politics were not separate elements as in the modern period and the recent period also. The major religious center was in Mothei near Kyoto, which belonged to Tendai sect. Nara, where the major temples of Kofukuzi and Todazi were located, was dominated by sects that were more philosophical, appealed to the aristocracy, and Mount Koya, the headquarters of Shingon sect of Buddhism. They were the religious institutions which were an integral part of political system, and politics were not separate elements as in the modern period. Buddhist temples were very important at that time. Shingon sect of Buddhism. Next, Zen Buddhism. Jainism also and the Buddhism also are very important religions at that particular time period, which stressed meditation as a way to attain salvation. That was divided into two sects, Soto and Rinzai. Soto and Rinzai. Zen Buddhism divided into two sects, Soto and Rinzai. Zen was imparted through religious training, rigorous training through such exercises as koan or riddles that forced the adherents to think about their assumptions. Trade with China was started after a long gap in 1300s and from the 1400s. Japan sent tribute missions to both gain recognition and for trade. Tribute missions. The Zen monasteries, many of whose monks had trained in China, they became important players in this trade. Zen monks, Zen monasteries, and the monks, they had trained in China because became very important players in this trade. The rise of daimyo, Oda Nobunaga, daimyo. In the political anarchy which prevailed up to the middle of the 16th century, the economy grew and institution developed a degree of sophistication. The feudal lords devoted much of their attention to consolidating their holdings and preventing antagonistic alliances. In this unstable situation, three figures gradually brought the main islands under their control. Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, next is Tokugawa Ieyasu. Those three figures gradually brought the main islands under their control. These three men of widely differing character followed each other, brought about not only the political unification of Japan but also its economic and social consolidation. The decisive event that marked this change was in 1568 when Oda Nobunaga forced the emperor to recognize Ashikaga Yoshiaki. And then, when the shogun proved disobedient, drove him out. Nobunaga never took the title of shogun, but through his military skill, brought large areas under his control. Nobunaga brought the daimyo under his control, but he also demolished the power of monasteries and village-based eco groups. In October 1571, Nobunaga destroyed the Tendai Buddhist monastery of Heizen, This monastery was a vast complex with large estates and its own warriors. Nobunaga, at the time of his death, controlled over one third of Japan and laid the basis of emerging political structure. In 1571, he started a new system of land tax assessment, and in 1576 he began to disarm the peasantry. Long years of continuous warfare had led to the emergence of an armed population. Nobunaga, to ensure peace, not only disarmed the peasantry so that they could return to their primary occupation of working on the land, but also brought the warriors or samurai to the castle towns, which were to form the nucleus of emerging cities. This step helped to reduce the independent power of military land aristocracy. Nobunaga also attempted to introduce uniformity in weights and measures. Hideyoshi, a commoner who became ruler of Japan. Nobunaga was murdered in 1582, and in the following years, Hideyoshi emerged a key figure uniting Japan. Hideyoshi came from an ordinary family, but because of the unsettled times, he could rise through his abilities to become a powerful ruler of the country. He managed to defeat other daimyo contenders such as Shibata Katsue. Daimyo contenders Shibata Katsue, and in 1585 he had himself appointed Kampaku, means the regent by the emperor. Hideyoshi built on the work done by Nobunaga and put into place a system that would lay the basis for Tokugawa rule. In 1588, he began a ruthless sword hunt, the aim of which was to clearly demarcate the farmer from the soldier. The samurai were the only class allowed to carry swords. Hideyoshi dreamed of world conquest. He launched an abortive invasion of Korean 1592, but faced stiff resistance from Korean and Chinese, and he had to call off his invasion. The dream of invading China and later India ended in failure. Part of the failure was also due to his inability to recognize the importance of naval power. Controlling the barbarians or Mishi. Till the 15th century, the Enu were able to hold their territories. Enu were the group of particular people. Till 15th century, the Enu were able to hold their territories. But from 16th century, rulers in the Tohoku region established a foothold in what is called Hokkaido. Hokkaido is a name of place where Tohoku region established. These rulers acknowledged Ieyasu's rule and changed their name to Matsumai, which gave its name to their castle town in southern Hokkaido. The rest of the area, known as Zo, then was populated by Enu. The Enu majority was living in that particular area, Zo. Clashes and disease led to a reduction of population. Clashes and disease, that was the reason of reduction of population, and a major rebellion in 1669 by the Eno was put down severely. Edo rule extended up to Matsumai, and Matsumai managed relations with the Eno. Trade was largely in timber, fish meal used as fertilizer. The land was very suitable for the fertilizer in Japan. This was a pattern of relationships between Edo and the outlying territories of Ryukyu Islands. Here, the Han of Satsuma handled trades and diplomatic relations. Similarly, the Han of Tsushima handled relations with Korea. So let us sum up very important things which we have studied about in where in the history of Japan. We have studied so many things, just like the brief introduction of history of Japan. 16th century covers a very long period, 794 to 16th century. This is to introduce some of the main developments that have shaped Japan. The Japanese islands lay on the fringes. Fringes means the inhabitants which were living in the earliest time period. The Japanese islands lay on fringes of Asian continent that was close to China. China, the dominant power of a region. Rulers on the Japanese islands always had the example of China, but hardly ever faced the prospect of direct rule. They borrowed heavily but adapted freely. And the tension of having to assert their differences has been a major factor in Japanese history. The Japanese islands were also part of an intricate maritime network that brought in people, goods, and ideas. The influence from the Pacific Islands, for instance, can be seen in the language and architecture of Japan. Korean influences also played a vital role, as you can see in the early art and ceramics. The Koreans brought in sophisticated techniques of production. The political organization created during this period developed from simple clan-based groups to a sophisticated imperial state. The imperial state soon became one element in the system, where other types of rulers viewed for powers. By the 16th century, the daimyo means the landlords, big landlords. The daimyo ruled Han, became the successful form of rule. Means at that time in 16th century, the landlords were ruling at that time. Yet the daimyo continued to give elegance to the emperor, who even while lacking political power, continued as the source of legitimacy. This inviolability of the imperial institution continued and was used in the modern period to build a modern nation state. We have studied in this unit 1 so many things: history of Japan, geographical condition of Japan, and the condition of daimyo, and the foraging period, and how the daimyo and how the samurai groups and the warrior class, they have played a very important role in the history of Japan. Now, in our next unit, we will study about the history of Japan, continue with other things, political condition, social condition, and so on. Thank you. Have a nice day.